Hello, and welcome to the Relationship Clinic. I'm Renee Natvig, your host, and today we kick off our Divorcing with Dignity series. Our special guest today is Elaine Silver. Elaine is a collaborative divorce lawyer, a Florida Supreme Court mediator, and a peacemaker. Elaine handles divorce, alimony, parenting plans and time sharing, child support, and prenuptial agreements. She has deep experience successfully negotiating and mediating family settlements. Elaine is president-elect of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals and a member of the board of the Central Florida Collaborative Family Law Group serving the greater Orlando area. Elaine is located here in Central Florida in the Lake Mary area. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here. So I'd like to get started first by helping people understand the difference between collaborative divorce and what people might think of as more traditional or litigated or court-based kind of divorce. So if you could just help people understand that difference.
Absolutely. The reality is that in Florida and most places, over 95% of all divorcing families end up figuring it out themselves. Over 95% of all families come to their own agreements.
But without even going to court at all.
Without going to court at all. It's
Okay.
really less than 5% of the families that actually go in front of a judge and ask a judge to decide their fate and their future and their children's future. Actually, our courts are so underfunded by the state that if it were any more than that, our system would kind of implode.
Wow.
So even though...
So it's a small percentage of people that actually go to court and
Absolutely.
figure it out. Okay.
And people are very surprised when I tell them that, because the common sense is still, oh my, I'm getting divorced. I'll go tell my story to a judge and the judge will decide for us. And our judges are by and large wonderful people and very well-meaning, but they are under-resourced, don't have enough time. No matter how well one thinks they're preparing to tell their story in front of a judge, that judge, he or she, will never know as much, care as much, and be as invested in the outcome as the family themselves. So, what have we done to try and help families create a framework where they can move from, oh my gosh, we're getting divorced, to, you know what, we figured this out, we can move along with ourselves, our lives, our families, our children. Mm-hmm. We have a number of structures to do that. One is collaborative divorce. Collaborative divorce says, from the beginning, we are going to engage lawyers to help us and other professionals, and we are going to create this team, this village, if you will, all of whom are focused on how can we move this family along the process of our family is coming apart to we've restructured our family. We're going to be able to move along separately, unmarried.
So I'm thinking, if we're thinking about the difference between collaborative and that litigated, so you made the point that it's a very small percentage that actually do that litigated. So by and large, what are these people doing then? That 95%, I guess we can just talk about that a little bit, the route of collaborative versus what else people are doing in that 95%.
Okay. So the reality also is that in our systems, probably 50, 60, 70% of all families have no lawyers and go through this. And of that big bunch, 50, 60, 70% without lawyers, many of them do not have money for lawyers at all. Mm-hmm. And they are what we call, the fancy word is pro se. They're representing themselves in the courthouse. Now, what help is available for those folks? Well, some of our courthouses, Orange County particularly, is very good about a self-help program where you can go and they'll give you forms and help you figure it out. But it is not simple. It is not simple, and unless you have violence in your family, there probably are no free legal services anymore.
Right. So if if it's not simple, and they want to do it themselves, well, that's one idea they had.
There is an option. Mm-hmm. So in Florida, all cases must be mediated before they can go to a judge.
Right.
Before they can be tried. Before a judge will talk to you, you must go to mediation. So all of our courthouses have in-house mediation process, but you have to start the case in the courthouse before you can get there. Mm-hmm. So another way that a lot of families are approaching this problem is to go to see a mediator before they do anything else. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that I am a Florida Supreme Court certified mediator, so that's one of the ways in which I'm a peacemaker, where a couple will come to me. As a mediator, I can sit in the same room with the couple. Right. Meet people. Some families, many who have children these days there are people in your profession, mm-hmm. LCSWs, mental health professionals, who are also trained as mediators and who will sit and help that family create a parenting plan. Sit in the same room with them, work with them to create the parenting plan that they need to get divorced.
And why would people potentially choose then collaborative versus sit with a mediator? So
what collaborative does, so this is what I've been describing is a little bit of a more on the do-it-yourself spectrum, mm-hmm. where you still need to figure out a lot of things yourself, because there's only so much that a mediator or a parenting counselor can do to help. What collaborative brings is here's what you need, all in one place, everybody together. You have collaborative lawyers who say, we're not going to court. We know we are invested in the idea that you, your spouse, your family moving forward will be so much better off if you figure this out yourself. If you let go of the idea.
With our help.
With our help.
Team. Yeah.
With this team, exactly. Mm-hmm. If you let go of the idea that some judge is going to have a better solution than you, with the help of this professional team, can figure out. Mm-hmm. So the lawyers are not there to reinforce the worst instincts of an angry person that moment in time.
We've all heard horror stories about divorce, the attorneys just really, at each other or
making
fighting.
Things worse.
Yes. Well, and some people don't realize that context of a divorce in court, how that it really makes it more contentious than maybe even people start out wanting to be.
And I'm not here to badmouth lawyers. We are trained that a client walks into us. We are trained to accept their story,
be their advocate.
But I do believe that we also train to be their counselor. And I think that is one of the primary differences between a collaborative lawyer and a litigation lawyer. That the collaborative lawyer guides the client. Yes, of course you're angry. Yes, of course you would like to win. But let's look at the big picture.
Yeah.
The story I like to tell is about a 3-week custody trial. And very, very unhappy relationship. Very, very strained marriage.
3 weeks in
We were
a trial.
actually 3 weeks. Now, this was many years ago, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, okay.
That was in another state and with different resources. That typically doesn't happen 3 weeks of a custody trial. And so we tried this case, and we won under whatever definition you want of winning. But I followed that client and that family, and it's not just one story like this. There are many. No matter how much you win, whether you count that as dollars received, or if you're the have spouse, fewer dollars paid, or if you count it in, I want so much time with my children, no, I only want to give you so much time with my children. However you measure that winning in a divorce trial, and that is also very problematic. If you follow those families who have been through the trauma of the litigation process, there are not good outcomes.
Yeah.
To the contrary, if you take a family and two spouses who don't like each other very much right now because they're getting divorced,
Right.
but there was a time, right, when they fell in love, made babies, were
Raised a family.
had all of that shared life experience. What we do in Collaborate is try to not get them to stay together as a couple, but to draw on that whole lifespan of experience, not just this really bad stuff going on right now, to move them forward in a productive way, where nobody wins and hopefully nobody loses.
So in some ways, to remember that there are some positive aspects to this person that they're sitting with, and maybe to open up to hearing more than that negative story that maybe got them to this place, but just to open up just a little bit more to being able to hear each other.
Absolutely. And I think people feel so much better if they're afforded the opportunity to do that.
So let's lay out, kind of help people understand what this collaborative process looks like.
Yes.
Who's in the room, and what people are doing.
Great question. Thank you. So it typically starts with each member of the couple talking to a collaborative lawyer, a collaborative divorce lawyer. And collaborative divorce lawyers are not just divorce lawyers, but highly trained in this collaborative process and understanding what we call interest-based decision-making, in understanding family dynamics, in understanding how to help people tap into their best selves, if you will. The collaborative lawyers then put together the rest of the professional team, a neutral financial professional.
So those two attorneys find and select a financial neutral. Okay.
By and large. Sometimes it happens differently. Sometimes the entrance to the process is through a collaboratively trained mental health professional, facilitator, such as yourself. Sometimes the inroad through the process is through the neutral financial professional, who are CPAs, divorce financial experts. They come from a range of financial backgrounds and also have this advanced training in expertise in helping families move efficiently and effectively through the process.
So the team is assembled.
Team is assembled.
An attorney for each person, a mental health neutral, such as myself, and a financial neutral.
Right.
Okay.
And we move forward open and transparent in meetings where everyone is in the room. So perhaps you remember that game from your childhood of, we used to call it gossip, where there would be a
telephone. We called it telephone.
Okay, same game, right? A circle of people sitting around, and you would whisper to the person next to you, and by the time it got around the circle to me, of course, I heard something totally different than what you had said, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, in the traditional litigation process, a lot of that goes on. Because a client talks to a lawyer, the lawyer, or maybe the paralegal in the office, or whoever, the lawyer maybe picks up the phone and calls the other lawyer, or maybe in this day and age, emails or texts or whatever communicates. By the time I communicate it to my client, it's probably
far
substantially different than what was meant and said. So we avoid that in collaborative, because we actually sit around the table, the six of us, to do the hard work that needs to be done. And that work consists of first gathering the information.
So just so that in case
Yes.
people were counting, so we have those 4 professionals plus the divorcing couple.
Correct.
So they are right there in the room with all the professionals.
Correct. Now, to say the hard work gets done in the meeting, that's true, but there's also much work going on between meetings, and that work is done so much more efficiently also than in the traditional litigation process. I was talking to a client the other day who themselves is a lawyer in a whole different field of law. And lawyers understand how inefficient what we call the discovery process in law is. That's where the spouses' lawyers each gather from their respective clients financial information and exchange it. And sometimes they're exchanging the same tax returns. And it's just tremendously inefficient. So we've cut down on that inefficiency and collaborative by having one neutral financial gather the information from both spouses. And if one person is asking you a question and me a question, and that one person is filtering and digesting all that information, they are going to get better information more efficiently than in our traditional litigation process. Obviously.
Because, there's not confusion going back and forth. It's
Right.
one person, one source, gathering all of the information.
Right.
Yeah.
And we also find that when things are done voluntarily, we get better information.
Well, that's a good point. If both people are giving it to one person, what's the trust level then about giving that information? I think you're saying that there might be more, like I might be more willing to give that information because, well, how does that work? Are people more willing to give that information then?
We find that first of all, the divorce system, certainly in Florida and virtually everywhere, requires open and transparent exchange of information with respect to finances. So in Florida, there is an affirmative obligation to share finances, financial information. And in most cases in our world today where everything is on paper, it is very hard to hide. And a seasoned financial expert is very well versed in finding out everything we need to know. And also importantly, if one spouse is much less educated about financial information, the financial neutral can spend the time bringing that not yet educated spouse up to speed.
Okay.
Give them the information that person needs to make good decisions.
Okay. So we've got in the room our 4 professionals and our divorcing couple, and you're saying that it can operate much more efficiently as well when we're not in the room, that people are gathering that information, giving it to financial person, and so doing their homework, if you will, outside of the room.
Right. And we haven't yet talked about the role of the mental health professional, facilitator, and we're exploring the right word for the person like you in that role. We've been using facilitator. Some people like quarterback. Some people like custodian of the process. So, you've heard of others, right?
Yeah. So just in general, the person who's kind of moving that process along, kind of keeping it going and being able to facilitate, I think that's a favorite word, facilitate what comes next. But there are established kind of rules and guidelines about how that process goes that mental health neutral is aware of in moving that process along.
Right. And where there are children, so we really didn't learn anything in law school about good parenting plans. Whereas you know a whole lot about what's best for kids and what's in their best interest and what works for them. helping parents navigate the challenges of parenting, right? Which are even harder when there's a divorce going on.
Yeah, let's talk about that as far as, children are often the kind of collateral damage to divorce. So how does collaborative protect children or support children in the family in a way that maybe typical litigated divorce wouldn't?
Amazingly so, I have to say, because I think certainly the facilitator is in many respects, well, not formally an advocate for the children, operates that way. The parents will sit down with you or the person in that neutral facilitator role and craft their parenting plan themselves. So again, rather than, I like to say, hiding behind the lawyers when they're discussing what's best for their children, they have to be there, be in the room, be present.
With their voice, their needs, their wants.
Their fears, their concerns. And
so that allows more vulnerability in the room, it sounds like, if people are going to be acknowledging their fears, or is that...
Yes, but those fears, right, are going to drive this. If we don't acknowledge them, if we pretend they don't exist, they're going to drive bad decisions.
So collaborative allows those to be acknowledged and present in the room.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So often, and again, the efficiencies in the process are that we allow each professional to do what they do best. The lawyers can step back when the financial neutral is gathering the information. The lawyers can step back when the mental health professional is working with the couple to figure out how they're going to co-parent moving forward. And that's not always smooth and easy. We have done collaborative cases where there are addiction issues, where there may be an alcoholic in the room or whatever addiction there is, where you may have people who are not functioning well, but they are still parents. And so what the kids need is each parent to function as best they can and create the safety and structure in a parenting plan to allow an impaired parent to do that. And that is going to happen better than in a courtroom setting.
How so? How does that happen better
Because judges, the whole legal structure is really can I take you back in a long story? So philosophically...
Yeah, let people know kind of how that came to be.
So philosophically, our legal system comes out of criminal cases and things like automobile accidents. So think way back before there were cars and there were horses and buggies, and the one person's horse and buggy runs over a person in the street. All right, that's the beginning of our legal system. That trying to figure, or a criminal case, somebody murders somebody, who's at fault, who did wrong. It came from these one event episodes, one-offs, I like to call them. Another, a criminal act, it happened, it was bad, who are we going to punish? A civil, the fancy word is tort system. There was an accident, whether with a horse and buggy or an automobile, whatever. This one event happens, who was at fault? How are we going to make whole the person who was injured? And we can do that with money. We can't make them whole, but we use money as an approximation for that. That's the genesis of our Western jurisprudence, all right? And so we take divorces, which are the rupturing of a family over a period of time. They are not a simple one-off, she had an affair, so I'm leaving. That may have happened, but it doesn't help us restructure the family and solve all the problems we have to solve going forward. And judges do the best they can.
And they're limited in their what they can order or what they can...
Absolutely. For example, in Florida, judges cannot order parents to pay for college education. Now, that's not true in many states, but it is true in Florida. They just can't do it. If once a child turns 18, for legal purposes in Florida, they're considered an adult. Judges can't make any orders about college. College may be a very important priority for many families.
For both parents.
For both parents. And how are we going to pay for it? And how are we going to fund it? Collaborative allows us to have conversations about, let's figure that out today. Let's not wait. So you say, how are children protected? That's one way. We can, if there's enough money to do it, we can figure out their college plan, or at least we can try.
And and you also said, as far as protecting kids, the way that the parents are going about finding a solution or finding an agreement is much different in collaborative than in this litigated way. So protecting children in the sense of how their parents are treating each other, and how that bleeds through to how kids are experiencing their parents then, when this is all both happening and after the fact. Right.
I mean, our literature tells us that, yes, divorce is traumatic. No question about it. But the long-term health of kids whose parents have been divorced doesn't depend on whether or not the parents divorced. It depends on how the parents divorced.
So significant.
Yeah. How much conflict and turmoil they created for the children, and how each of them was able to continue to be the best parent they can be. And collaborative helps us focus on that, not on the battle. No, they're my kids, you can't have them.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So we've talked about how it works. Let's see here. So we've talked about how it works and how it works well. Do you have a particular example, maybe an experience of how it worked really well for you, that people you were helping?
Oh, many. And of course I can't talk about
specific,
in a way
real specific.
That discloses anybody's identity, because of course that's a wonderful feature of collaborative that we haven't talked about yet. It's private. And what that means, today in Florida, when you start a case with something, a divorce case is started with a piece of paper that's filed that's called a petition. As soon as the lawyer files that in the courthouse, it is public record. And I think probably in Florida, everybody's had the experience, if they've had a traffic ticket, that's public. It gets filed in the court. And as soon as you get that traffic ticket, your mailbox is flooded with letters.
Take the this course
lawyers,
and that course, right,
which also say, you need a lawyer to represent you in your traffic ticket, hire me. Well, there are actually real-world examples. I've had clients come to me saying, what is this letter I got in my mailbox? Which says, your spouse has filed for a divorce. If you don't have a lawyer yet, come see me. This is really happening. Now, imagine if you have teenage children, and because you actually, if in the traditional method, many lawyers follow the protocol of filing the petition and then telling the client, the other spouse about it, actually having them served, it's not a person in uniform, but it's a person who brings them the paperwork. Here, these are your divorce papers. Imagine if you have a teenager living in your house who routinely gets the mail and sees all these letters from lawyers, and that's how they learn about their parents' divorce. Unintended consequences that people don't think about. So collaborative keeps this whole thing private, and we have rules and statutes supporting the collaborative process in Florida now, and judges are very supportive of this process. And once we come to an agreement, we can keep that private. Tiger Woods actually was one of the first people to have a collaborative divorce that was kept pretty private. And the celebrity divorces that you don't hear about, many of them are collaborative. In a litigated divorce, by contrast, you have to file, if you're one of the spouses, you have to file with the court this piece of paper called a financial affidavit.
And it goes right out there.
It goes right out there. It's everything you own, everything you owe, what your income is, what your expenses are, what your bills are. I mean,
so all of that can stay private in the collaborative.
Yes.
All of that background information and what gets actually known then as public information is
the fact of the divorce, because we still need a judge to legally declare the people divorced. So the fact that there is a divorce that's happened, we can do all of this privately. Once we have the whole agreement done, we can present it to the court and say to them, Judge, we figured it all out. Each lawyer has a copy, each spouse has a copy. We're just going to tell you, Judge, that they have agreed and they're happy with the agreement, and please get them divorced. And if we ever need to come back to court for any reason, we will file the paperwork then.
So that's one really that's one advantage to collaborative, is keeping that confidentiality. Some folks that I've talked to have an impression that collaborative divorce is expensive. And so maybe you can speak to our listeners both about expense and time compared to litigated.
Yes, thank you for that question, because it is really important. Divorce with lawyers is expensive, no matter what. It just is. We see people who can't afford it spending all kinds of money on divorce with lawyers, especially litigated divorce with lawyers, where you're fighting about the outcomes, and that's not a good thing. We have studies that show that collaborative divorce, even with all those professionals, is less expensive than a blown-out litigated war divorce.
With just two attorneys
Even
and a judge.
with just two attorneys. Because of what we talked about, that we're letting each professional do what they do best and letting the lawyers step back from some of those processes, the gathering information, the crafting, the parenting plan if there are children. As to time, how fast you get through the process, we also are collecting data around the state, which tells us that collaborative divorces happen much more quickly than litigated divorces. If you have to wait in Central Florida for a judge to decide your case, you could be waiting not months but years. And it's not their fault.
Right.
For example, in
overloaded.
Orange County, where we're sitting now, each of our family court judges has approximately 5,000 cases on their dockets.
I heard that the other day. Amazing. Yeah.
So they're doing the best they can. They're working incredibly hard and well, but if you are in that line, you're just going to have to wait for all the other people who got in line ahead of you. Not so with collaborative. We can do it in a period of months.
So that was speaking to time, confidentiality, money.
Oh, as to expense?
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
So we also, in our community and in every community, we are very focused on making collaborative affordable for people with less money. So, for example, we have a model here in Central Florida, which we call which is for families with under $100,000 of family income. We have created a model where the professionals in the collaborative community will each work at vastly reduced hourly rates to guide a family with 3 meetings through their divorce at a total cost to the family of under $10,000. That's a bargain divorce with professionals, no matter how you slice it. And time.
For 3.
We also have here at Barry University Law School, which is located here in Orlando, there is a clinic teaching new lawyers about collaborative, which we're very proud of. People in our community have worked very hard to make that happen. And as part of the clinic, they are providing free collaborative cases to people who qualify economically or because they're veterans or because they have unique issues in the family.
Okay.
So we're trying very hard to make it accessible to many folks.
Maybe you can share a little bit about.
One, we're sitting here in September of 2018, and there is one very significant time issue from now until the end of this year, December 31st, 2018. We have just had a change in the tax law, in the federal tax law, starting January 1st, 2019. And for as long as I've been doing this, which is a long time, before that even, alimony has been tax deductible to the person who pays the alimony and included in the income of the recipient spouse.
Tax deductible, and now add to your income.
And the reason for that is that Uncle Sam helps defray the cost of 2 households. I mean, the strategy was put in place really when we had a different world where in most households it was the man out earning the living and the woman was staying home raising the children. And our tax structure was very different. High wage earning people were, and again, not in Florida because we don't have income taxes here, but in other states where there are income taxes, high wage earning people were paying in excess of 50% in taxes in the real world. And so you could, what we call bracket shift, reduce the tax burden, reduce the percentage of dollars. The payer gets to deduct the alimony. They don't have to pay taxes on it. They write that check for alimony. It's tax-free to the person who's paying it, and the taxes get paid at the lower rate of the recipient spouse. There are still families for whom that tax shifting is important, and it is going to go away unless your divorce is resolved by December 31st, 2018. And the only way I know of, short of just getting to an agreement at your kitchen table, to get this done that quickly is with a collaborative divorce right now. I've been having that conversation with clients for the last few months.
So we've got 4 months to get to it.
Hardly.
Yes. Okay.
The clock is really ticking on that one.
Okay. So as you did mention that, so collaborative is really helpful. And are there situations, and you even mentioned for situations with substance abuse, you can still work through the process, but where might it not? Can you help people understand where it might not be good for them?
Yeah, so one of the concerns obviously is domestic violence. And sadly, we have way too much of it in our society. And the scariest, most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence is when they're about to leave the relationship. So we don't exclude domestic violence cases from collaborative. And I will tell you that in my experience, similarly, our courts, as hard as they try, are just not equipped when there are children to figure out good solutions to domestic violence. They often require nuanced solutions, not... The courts are very good at all or nothing solutions. If somebody's an abuser and can't see the children, bang, that's it, you're done. But if it's more nuanced than that, and often it is, and we have had cases where there has been serious episodes of domestic violence, and it often goes together with substance abuse, be it alcohol or drugs or whatever the abuse of choice, where we have successfully managed the family going forward, gotten people into appropriate help, appropriate programs, appropriate safety structures. And again, we can do that with so much more attention to detail in the collaborative process, bringing in trained professionals, advocates for the children, whatever we need.
I like to think of it as more creative. That
Yes.
You can have so many more creative possibilities, nuanced.
Again, we don't want to freeze people at their very worst. We don't want to assume that, and this isn't true for everyone, there's certainly outliers, but there are also domestic violence situations, no excuse for them, but where those perpetrators can still function as parents to the extent that they are capable with appropriate safeguards.
Okay, and that could still work through collaborative to figure those solutions out. So in your experience, are there solutions that just aren't appropriate? Then I guess that's a case-by-case basis that you just talked about there.
It's a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Often people are concerned that if funds and finances are being hidden, that collaborative is not appropriate. Again, I will tell you that in my experience, you bring in a skilled financial person, they are going to get better information in a collaborative model less expensively than in the court system, where so much money is sucked up in the discovery process if people are not cooperative. And that can be devastating as well.
So we're talking about using this collaborative process for divorce, but there are other situations to use collaborative for, and maybe you can help people understand what that would be.
Great question. So the collaborative process says, instead of, again, it's this interest-based negotiation rather than win-lose. So in any situation where people have a reason to preserve a relationship, collaborative makes a whole lot of sense. So, for example, we're seeing with the aging of our population of baby boomers, we're seeing so many estate controversies, either about caring for elderly folks who are no longer capable of managing their money or managing their persons and the siblings are fighting, or after there's been a death and the beneficiaries are fighting over the money and they could spend it all on litigation, and typically those are people who do have relationships to preserve, whether they're siblings or descendants, or it's a family structure. So collaborative is brilliant in that context. It's also really good in things like when a business partnership falls apart. We've taken those disputes typically to courts, but we don't have to. And if people were in a medical practice or a business relationship of whatever kind, they have reasons to not spend all their time and energy looking backwards at what went wrong, but construct a beneficial plan to move forward. It's interesting. If you talk to lawyers who do business litigation, so company gets in trouble, whatever, gets sued, and the CEO goes to their lawyer and says, we just got sued, what should we do? More often than not, the corporate lawyer will say, don't be stupid, you should settle. Because whatever you have to pay them
will be less
than paying us to fight about it, and the lost opportunity cost. Having all of the people in your organization focused on fighting this battle instead of moving forward to do your next deal, build your business, whatever it is.
So we're talking about couples getting divorced. We've been talking quite a bit about collaborative. Can you help people understand where mediation fits into as a possibility?
Yes. And I get that question a lot. How is well, it's like mediation. Well, no. Yes and no. So they are both models of a system to get you through a problem and get to solutions. Not look backwards, look forwards. So mediation and a collaborative process have that in common. The difference is that mediation, as it's typically practiced in the divorce courts, is a one-off event. When you can go to mediation with or without lawyers. When you go to mediation with lawyers, you spend a lot of time and money with the lawyers, exchanging this information, finding out all of that, and then you sit in a room with the lawyers, with the clients, they're very angry. They haven't spoken. There's been all this bad stuff. And you expect this magic mediator to get them to a place where they can resolve their differences in a couple of hours, a half a day. If you mediate at the courthouse, you get 2 or 3 hours. If you hire a private mediator, you can get a whole day. But it turns into a marathon. And I don't think that's a very healthy way to mediate.
One time sit down, figure it out.
And with litigation lawyers in the room, the undercurrent is always, if you don't do it my way, I'll see you in court.
The threat.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are models of mediation where the way I practice mediation as well is where the couple comes to me and we meet for 2 hour blocks of time. And we take as many of those as we need to figure out the process. So it's not a marathon. It's not we have to do this today. There are no deadlines. It's an entirely voluntary process. But that's not typically how mediation works in our litigation system. The difference with collaboratives is that from day one, everybody is solution focused, and there is never this undercurrent of, well, my lawyer says, well, if we don't do it your way, the judge will see it my way. The lawyers are on the same page about helping to create solutions that are truly win-win. I'm sure you know. Shall I tell the interest-based negotiation story around the orange?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the classic interest-based what is this thing we're calling interest-based negotiation? So one of the classic little teaching tools is the story of the orange, right? Mom comes home and her 2 children are fighting over a single orange because she didn't have time to go shopping, and so she's tired of hearing the children scream. She picks up the orange, she takes a knife, she whacks it in 2, and she gives them each a half. And they both proceed to cry. Well, what could be fairer, right?
Than half and
half. Than half an orange. You're both fighting over the same orange. Here, you've each got half. We're done. Problem solved. Well, interest-based negotiation would have stopped and said, what is it about this orange that's important to each of you? And one child would have had the opportunity to say, I really want the juice because I just came home from soccer practice and I'm really thirsty for a glass of orange juice. And the other child would have been able to say, and I need to bake a cake tomorrow and I wanted to put the orange rind in my cake. And we could have had a win-win solution where they both got what they needed.
I think that's a perfect encapsulation of how, a collaborative process is so much more possibilities thinking and outside of the black and white or typical box thinking. Yeah.
To make that concrete, what to do with the house is often a critical...
When you can't cut it in half.
Although there's an old, I think it's a Verizon ad, where the judge orders the guys with the chainsaws to cut it in half. Not in the real world, right? But what do you do with the house? I want it. No, I want it. No, I want it. No, I want it. Well, let's explore that. What is it about the house that's so important to you? Well, I just don't want him to have it. What is it about the house that's so important to you? Well, it's where the children grew up. I want the children to be able to stay there forever. We just keep exploring the whys behind these expressed wants, if you will, and explore other possibilities. Well, maybe we bird nest. Maybe the kids stay there and the parents go back and forth. Again, that doesn't happen very often. It happens once in a while, and for short periods of time.
You can, yeah.
But a judge is never going to do that.
Right. But getting to that why, but for each person, to flesh out what would be acceptable solutions for both people. That just is so meaningful, I think, for people. Yeah.
And I also find that when people are scared, and it's very scary to get divorced, right? So when people are afraid, they sort of dig into that most primitive part of themselves. Right. This is your expertise.
Yes, the amygdala, the limbic system.
Fight or flight, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're fearful and you're either going to run away and or turn the other person into a monster.
Or freeze. Or try to appease, which could, all of that can be, avoided.
And so I find that if we give people the glimmer of hope, because optimism is really important, that they really have the tools to figure this out, that people do revert to being kind and respectful to each other. I see this all the time, and it's so what helpful. I love about my work.
That is so helpful.
It's what you love about your work,
I
right?
mean, that's why I'm resonating with to offer people hope, to offer that there are possibilities where we can be kinder to each other and more understanding, and these little or not so little beings, these children, to know that most times both people want to be able to do something that's going to be as helpful to them as possible, and so to have a way of navigating this is just really helpful.
And just the idea that we, the professional team, are not going to freeze them at their worst, I think can be really empowering for people.
That you're there to support them. And both attorneys, I mean, I think that's also another thing when you're in collaborative, that both attorneys really want the best for both people. So when you've got all of that focus on, it's not as if one attorney's sitting there, supporting you and against the other client. Yeah. Everybody's cooperating in that team.
Yeah. I was really touched that a client recently brought me a little magnet with a quote from Thoreau, which I won't remember because I didn't bring it with me, but says something about looking towards the future and thinking about goals and options and alternatives and a path. Yeah. What you imagine life to be, what your dreams and hopes are. And what he said to me when he gave me that was that he really expected to have just a very dry legal process. Okay, we need to get divorced. Here, you get this, I get that, we're done. But instead, in this process, we were able to have conversation about how do you imagine yourself, your family, 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road. And to give people that opportunity, because otherwise they're going to be back in my office after the next marriage fails and the next marriage fails, and I don't want that for them.
No. Well, is there anything else that you would want to share with people about divorcing with dignity?
If people are talking to lawyers who do not discuss collaborative process with them, I think they are being done a disservice. If what they're hearing is, oh, that's just a waste of time. If you have to go to court, you get a new lawyer. Why do that? Then I think they're in the wrong law office. I think everyone is entitled to understand that it's out there, sanctioned by law, supported by the courts as a really good optional alternative for their families. And I should address this issue about a collaborative lawyer does not go to court.
Yes.
Okay. So if you are one of that very small percentage of cases, and again, we have settlement rates of 95% across the board, no matter how you do your divorce. So there are some collaborative cases that don't get fully resolved. There are. But what we've accomplished in the process is good financial information, maybe a parenting plan, maybe they're just stuck in a couple of hard issues. We can bring in a mediator to try and figure out that last piece. Or we can send folks to litigation lawyers, which, by the way, is very much the British model. It's exactly what happens in the UK, which is where our judicial system comes from. The mother country, way back when, right? They have solicitors and barristers. The solicitors are like the collaborative lawyers. They never go to court. They try and settle the matter, whatever it is. And if the folks need a litigation attorney. It's the solicitors in the UK who actually hire the barristers. The clients don't even technically hire them. And here we make that same transition to a litigation lawyer if need be.
So that it wouldn't be a situation where you might start out as a collaborative process and that same attorney would then turn into a litigated, armed with all of that information that you got you might have information pieces figured out, financials or parenting plan or whatnot, but those same attorneys wouldn't then represent in court. Yeah.
Right. Anybody who's ever sat and had their deposition taken, which can happen in a divorce, where if you're the lawyer, you get to ask me all these questions and you're across the table from me, and it is not pleasant. We eliminate the idea that the lawyers are adversaries. We don't use those words. It's not opposite counsel. It's my collaborative colleague. And they're not parties, they're people who are trying to figure out their futures.
Thank you so much. It's been great having you here. And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way? We'll have all of your information, of course, in the show notes for the podcast, but how can they, just let them know how they can get a hold of you?
Really easy. Go to my website, www.silverdivorce.com. It's my name, Elaine Silver. It's also my hair color, but that's only recently. And my phone number, and you can email me through my website, and I am always happy to discuss this with anybody because I think it's just a better way for people to be in the world.